Hello and welcome to episode 87 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me as ever is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. You?
Stuff. Yeah, shattered but good. This episode is probably a little bit late. Apologies for that, but life and then things and work and stuff. But before,
really.
Yeah, nightmare. Before we go anywhere else, let's talk about Element Games. So you can go and buy all your hobby crack, your toys, your airbrush, whatever you need for your airbrush, pretty much. You name it, they do it. They're getting in all the Star Wars Legion stuff if that's your thing. But GW-wise, pre-order week is usually an extra 5% off, so 20% off. And that leads us into, I do want to talk about, it's not strictly Heresy, but Forgebane. Have you seen the box? So this is a starter set-ish for 40k.
Yes, another one of those where they release some cool models, but then you have to buy a load of other models that you don't want to get it.
Yeah, but it also works as a starter set. And it's Mechanicum versus Necrons, and this is the first place you can get the two Armiger Knights and the Cryptek character for the Necrons.
Yes.
And it's cool. It's good to have variety for a starter set for 40k. That's just sensible stuff. But also, so we're recording this before the weekend, before it's released, so it's a little bit out of date, but already by release time. But it's going to be, so it's cheaper to buy that box than it is to buy everything in that box, and that's before you take into account the Armigers and the is it just the Armigers? Yeah, I think it's just the Armigers. No, it's the Cryptek as well, isn't it? So you get two Armigers and a Cryptek for free, and it's still cheaper than everything else.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are, people will know how much it is now, but that's a whacking saving. So you're looking at probably just under 80 quid, I'm going to guess, from Element for all that stuff.
So you do it.
As a Mechanicum player, pretty much everything in the Mechanicum side I'm using, which is great. Maybe I'll sell some of the, if you can sell the Necron stuff for 30 quid, even if it's 30 quid, you're paying 50 quid for two Armigers and a unit of, dudes, and a character.
Yeah, I find the Mechanicum stuff really handy for kit bashing and doing all sorts of bits and pieces with. So it's not bad stuff to have, really. No,
there are some really cool bits on there. As well. And then, of course, if you do play 40k, it's a starter army as well. Kind of half tempted to keep it all and do some Necrons at some point. It's a good starter set for Necrons.
It's very easy to buy it and then just pile it up somewhere and then keep it for a rainy day or when something comes along.
I mean, the one good thing about Necrons is if you want to paint them quickly, you can paint them quickly.
Yeah, probably they're the 40k equivalent of Iron Warriors, aren't they, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a quick smash it out army.
Well, I would say that Iron Warriors are probably the 40k equivalent of Iron Warriors. But
well, that's true.
But we know what you mean. We know what you mean. So yeah, head on over to Element Games, so Saturday morning when that comes out, 10 o'clock, and you will get a great price. And if you go through theimperialtruth.com and click the banner, or through the link that's in the show notes and on the Twitter and the Facebook, then you help support the show as well. And I suspect they're going to go, they're going to sell well. Very, very well. Exciting.
There's a lot of talk about them. I think a lot of people are quite excited to get their hands on
the Knights. I think,
so I think they'll be popular.
Yeah. So obviously we haven't got 30k rules for them yet. They're talking about coming out with them. And we haven't got 40k rules for them yet either. But it looks like it's got potential to not only fill out Knight houses a little bit, but also they're obviously going to be a little easier to deal with than Knights. So it could work.
Yeah, it's a softer option, won't it? So.
Well, yeah, but it's something you can deal with, whether they're really effective for their points or not. Is not so much the issue. It's more that you hopefully won't need to bring the absolutely top anti-tank killing weapons to deal with them. So it means that more of your army is effective. And therefore it doesn't matter then really if they're super good for their points or not, because you're getting more of an enjoyment out of the whole game. You're getting more of your units can do stuff. You're getting a better play experience from that. So, hopefully anyway, I mean, obviously this is before any rules or anything like that. So, it's a bit of speculation, but that's all good. You know, we're always bang on with this stuff we talk about early, aren't we? So.
Yeah, we're very rarely correct on any of it.
No, people forget the bad stuff, and you know, you just remind them of the things you got right. And then,
yes.
So we're recording this section of the show on a Wednesday, and literally minutes ago, we had a load of drops from the Gamma Game Show, trade show. Have you managed to feast your eyes on any of this yet?
Yeah, I had a little look. Fortunately, the joys of social media, it was all over that.
Yeah.
So the one thing that really caught my eye, probably yours as well, the Van Sars look amazing,
stunning. So it was all up on the Warhammer community site as well. Kill Team coming for 40k, that's cool. Yeah, you know, Shadespire stuff, brilliant. The Van Sar look fantastic, and there's just loads of crazy cool stuff on those sprues as well. So again, when we're talking about militia, you've now got another variation you can go for. So you can.
What's great as well, it's mix and match. I mean, you could easily buy a Van Sar, some Orlocks, some Genius to the Cults, and just literally bash your life away and just like get some really cool looking humans.
Absolutely, phrasing. You can, and what you can do is you could just keep your Van Sar if you want to go for certain provenances. Like
definitely.
Each of the stars of gang will lend itself towards, you know, a different province. So provenance, sorry. So you can have, you know, it doesn't necessarily all work out, but you'll have your idea for whichever one you're doing, and then you can lean into them. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. And really, really cool stuff as well. Can't wait for all that, but that's not Heresy, so we'll move on from that. We did have a release, didn't we? We had some more bits and pieces for the Custodes, but again, we're in that very quiet time.
Well, the problem is now every time on the Friday when the email drops, I open it and just very much go, okay, see now. It is that horrible 3 or 4 months after that you have to live through after Weekender where nothing is very exciting. Everything's been seen, everything's been. I mean, don't get me wrong. When they release the Termite, I'll be mega excited, I think, but you know, there's not a lot else I think I'm going to be too interested to see.
That Termite would be coming fairly soon, you know, relatively soon, should I say, because they featured it on the community. People would be glad they can get a hold of Valdor now.
Yes.
But yeah, we're just going to work through, as we said, we'll work through everything, and it won't be long till it's May, and it's Warhammer Fest. And then
we'll have a load more stuff to look at.
Yeah, you know, we'll cycle through it. And because we don't have, and this is again, it's weird, and I don't like to hark back too much to the way things used to be, but it's so been flipped that when Age of Sigmar and 40k are getting all these releases, then it's kind of like it's like how it used to be, isn't it? We'd see all this stuff coming up. And it's like, oh, okay. We used to be, the Forge World side of things used to be getting that. But hey, you know, it's plugging away. It's all coming. It's, and it's good stuff.
It's, the good thing is, there was nothing that, it might be different for some people. There's nothing there that I saw at the weekend that I thought I need that and I need it now. Because do you remember me harping on about the chainglaives that never seem to arrive? Yeah. So in some ways it's quite nice. But you see some cool stuff, and it's nice when it's cool. But it's worse if it's something that you desperately need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you're just sitting there waiting everywhere. Oh no, not this week. And that could be a lot worse, I think. So we're lucky in that respect.
Yeah. And we won't get into the rumours of 40k, but there's some potentially 30k linked things in that, but there's a lot of rumours out there at the moment, and I advise people to bring their salt with them to those rumours. Some of them I've heard, stronger than others, but but it's what we like to do as gamers, isn't it? So we acknowledge that at the very least. Just on other things, the London Heresy, some extra tickets got released. I can't remember if that was said last episode or not. So if you are interested in going to the London Heresy still, there were, I think, an extra 20 or so tickets were released. So up to 100 capacity, which would be amazing.
That's not a bad number, is it, really?
It's not. Would make it the largest independent Warhammer event in the UK for sure, which is quite nerve-wracking. And
you better run a good event then.
Yeah, whatever. More the logistics of it, actually. I need to kind of send a few emails and try and work out exactly what we've got, because at previous events we've relied on my voice with 100 gamers. That might be a little bit more tricky depending on the situation, so I'm trying to adjust around that as well, which will be interesting for sure. Sure.
Definitely.
It is good fun. And listening to a few other podcasts as well, so many you forget how many events there are now for Heresy. It's getting up to the point where it doesn't quite equal the other games, obviously, but there are regular events going on around the UK all the time, various parts of the US and Canada as well. We're going to have some guys on to talk about the Warhammer camp, hopefully soon, or Heresy camp, in the next episode or so, because there's so much. There is so much, and it's great, and you can find these things. It's going to be for some of the smaller events. We're going to get to that point where you need to be quick. For the small events with good reputations, those tickets are going to sell pretty quickly, I think. And we sold the 80 tickets for London Heresy fairly quickly as well, to be honest.
Well, I do think there's obviously certain events where, because they're limited on numbers, say you've got, 30 players that you can fit in. If you get a core set of people that enjoyed that and they want to go to the next one, you're already limited to how many, spare tickets there may be. And then a few people have only got to mention that they really enjoyed it. And then suddenly, bang, you're into a feeding frenzy when they release the tickets go up on sale and you could sell out within minutes. So, but it's good to see, the more events there are, the more events that are selling out shows that people still want to play the hobby, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
And you see things like the painting courses that sell really well. It's like Andy's Cult of Paint courses are selling out still. They're released in within a day or two, or some of them within a day. They've sold out. So that shows that people are still wanting to learn and do things, because a lot of his stuff's very Heresy related. Like the vehicles course is very sort of Heresy focused, and I think the infantry courses as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think CK Studios has still got some space for their second part of their course. I think that's the Bank Holiday Monday, the second one in May, I think. I'm trying to remember which way round my weekends are now. So they've got that going on. They've still got tickets for that one, I think. I'm not 100% sure about the 101 course, the first 2 days. But part of it as well with some of these events, I think, is, Tom's running one down in Eastbourne, right near me. And he actually said, "Did you want a ticket for that?" And it's like, here, cheers, because actually that's so close. It's going to be the first Heresy event that, 2-dayer that I can drive to and sleep at home, which makes a difference. So
it's like that one for me that's in Coulsdon.
Yeah, but they become more important for your calendar, because you don't, particularly if you've got a family, you don't have to travel. You don't have to spend all your weekend away from them, and it becomes much more manageable. So there is an aspect of that as well, as groups grow around the country, particularly so in the southeast. Space is of a premium, and to find a place that holds that kind of event, yes, Coulsdon, that's still an hour and a bit for me. I could do that and drive home, absolutely, but it's that little bit longer. But, before that one, it was, Southampton's a fair way to go to come back in the evening and then go back again. You have to really think, do you want to do that?
Yeah.
So they become more important for those kind of groups as well, which is really good.
The first time I did it was at the London Heresy, the first one that you ran. And I found it great that I could go there, get up early, turn up, help as much as I did, and then as soon as it's finished, say right, jump in the car and go home. It was fantastic to have that sort of coming home, sleeping in your own bed feeling, rather than that whole whole weekend away feeling guilty sort of scenario. It did make it a lot easier. So
yeah,
there is something to be said for it, definitely.
Yeah, it would be nice to live like half an hour away from a Element Games or a Firestorm, wouldn't it? To have
that would be quite. Yeah, I think people that do live near like an Element Games or a Firestorm, I mean, it's a bit like living near
Warhammer World. Exactly, yeah.
Just spoiled.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even got Bromley. They do hold events at Warboar, Bromley. That is close enough for me to do up and back in a day, but even that, that's not just popping up the road. That's it's a bit of a drive. I do need to get up there, but that's pretty much the most local store I've got, which has got the space to do that. And that's an hour and however long it is to get there. So it's just it's just where I live. The trying to have a game store in this area, the rates are so high that it becomes tricky to do. So, I don't mind living here, but it has its issues. Gaming issues.
Hobby issues.
Hobby issues, absolutely. So, what have you been up to?
Not a great deal, really. I haven't been painting much of late, just with real life things getting in the way. So that has been a bit depressing. I do find that my painting relaxes me. So if I can't get a good few hours in of a week, I find that I do get a bit depressed about not getting any painting done. So I've managed to get some done over the last, I think, couple of nights. I just decided to start to paint a leg like I normally do. So I started painting an apothecary's leg in white, and then realised that I don't like painting white. So that was a revelation. And after painting Eidolon's cloak white, I should have really remembered what an arse it was to get the white to blend properly. But it's coming along. It's something I want to get done for May. Hopefully I'll get it all finished, but I'm not really. Thing is, I'm not particularly motivated at the moment because I don't feel that competitive edge or urge to really push myself.
Right.
So I've got tickets to Fest, but I'm not really worried about Golden Demon, if that makes sense. I'm not thinking, I've got this piece, I really want to enter it, I really want to get it done. I'm just sort of like, if I get it done, I get it done. And I'm not really motivated very much at the moment. So I'm a bit on a low, but hopefully, with a good couple of painting sessions, I might sort of get back into the swing of things.
Yes, indeed. Are
you still in hiatus with the move and everything else?
A little bit. I broke the nozzle on my airbrush, which didn't help. And
that doesn't help.
Yeah, I have yet to manage to get the end of the nozzle out of the the thread out either. But I borrowed another one which needs to be cleaned up. Excuse my iPad going off. Something's happened in the football, I expect. So I've got an airbrush to get on with some airbrushing. Hopefully over this weekend. Just finishing up like another set of shades by guys. And then I need to start I'm like, oh shoot, I need to get on with projects now. But as I said, with the Space Wolves, I'm waiting. I actually started playing around with the old, Space Marine colour thing on Bolter and Chasesword again, trying to work out what to do with my Space Wolves. Because I think I've said on the show that, yes, I like my quarter colour scheme, but actually, realistically, I'd rather just paint them quicker. And I know, the hope is that after the course, I can paint better with the airbrush, and it will be quick enough for me to just go back over and do the minimal amount I've done to do them again. So, reviewing, I have talked about this because someone sent me some images of their Space Wolves actually with red kind of arms and things like that. I can't remember the guy's name. I do apologise. Really good to see what they're doing. So I was playing around today. I think I'm going to go for actually a standard grey, but then I'm just working on how to do the spot colour with it. And I'm thinking maybe one arm up to the elbow red.
I must admit, the grey and the red I think works well together, and it's nice to get a good bit of red into the Space Wolves. I think it really sort of helps them and makes them look really impressive on the table.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, it's how much and it's where. I haven't fully decided. I'm thinking like left knee pad red, and then at the moment I'm thinking up to the elbow on the right arm red as well. But that might change. I don't know. Red helmets was another option, but I don't want to put too much on there. And I don't. Yeah,
you've got to be careful you don't overdo it.
And I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to put too little on there either. So I just got to try and hit that balance. So what I'll probably do at work is over the next few weeks in the build up to the event. So, when I know how I want to paint. I mean, we're painting a Contemptor on that day, so I can just do that realistically, I can just do that in the grey, because if all I'm doing is a knee pad and a fist or something, I can do that with a brush if I need to,
Yeah.
So
definitely.
it's sensibly. So yeah, I just need to play around with that, but I'm looking forward to that more and more actually, because I want to get stuff done.
Do you know what? I found all the courses I've been on quite fulfilling, because that whole sort of learning, that sort of like sitting down learning something, trying to try new things, it's quite fun. It's quite rewarding in its own way. I think obviously I haven't been to many gaming events, but they have their own thrill. But when you're sitting there learning a new skill, I find it quite exciting.
Yeah, it certainly has an appeal to it, I think, and the sense of accomplishment when you've done it as well. So fingers crossed,
definitely
actually do it by the end of the course.
I'm sure you'll be fine.
Yeah, I also need to contact Kat or Caleb and work out exactly what I need to take with me, because I'm sitting there going, I probably don't even airbrush properly, at the moment. So I need to get everything. I need to look at what paints I need for the colour schemes as well. All those little bits and pieces. There's lots of little.
What colours were you using for your airbrush?
Good question.
I seem to remember you said that you were using a different brand, weren't you?
I'm using Vallejo Model Air, and I'm trying to remember now, one of the greys, medium sea grey. No, I don't think it was medium sea grey. Might have been medium. No, that looks a bit dark. Can't remember which one I was using. One of the greys. I've got loads of them. German grey? Does that sound right? I don't know. So I was using that for the grey, and I've got a box full of Vallejo for airbrushing, because it's easy to get hold of, and my mates use it and it works well for them. So again, even after this course, I don't sit there. I don't want to be able to paint masterpieces. That's not what I want from this course. I want to be able to achieve level A quickly and efficiently.
So you're looking for a reasonable quality quickly, aren't you? You're looking for speed and improvements in technique rather than trying to really, really get good and slow everything.
So I don't have, as it stands, it would take a lot for me to develop the level of control that you need to paint to a top level. I can see that with the models I paint now, it's the control that lets you down. Like, that's the easiest thing. And I can't, over the years, I've got better, but it takes a lot for that control, and I'm still way off having the ability to paint anything competition level, even probably finalist pin. Yeah. So, cool, whatever, fine. I'm happy-ish. Well, I'm happy enough with where my models are. I understand that airbrushing could move that on a bit, potentially. Well, that's part of the idea of the course. But if I can go through a Space Marine Army, vehicles particularly, and cut the time down I spend to do the level I'm doing, then that'll be brilliant for me. So that's...
because I think you can take different things out of a lot of the courses. like I went on Richard Gray's, and that was very, very much sort of learning a higher end, and it was about taking your time on things, whereas the Cult of Paint and the airbrushing ones are very much sort of improve your quality, but do it in a manner that's not going to, you'd be able to not churn it out pretty quick, which I think is quite important for army painting.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I've said many, many times, the process of getting paint from pot onto palette onto model for me is a lot slower than it is for other people, the actual physical process of painting. So airbrushing is bound to speed that up just because of how slow I am. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But we'll certainly, as we build up towards it, I just need to spend, small amounts of money. I've managed to source a Betrayal at Calth Contemptor off one of the guys on Facebook. Thank you very much for that, because that's the base model as they want to use a Contemptor. I have a Contemptor, but I think it's already built, like fully built, and they want bits left off. But also, it's in storage somewhere, and I've no idea where it is. So rather than take the risk, it's just like, I'll just buy another one for $5. That's fine. I can handle that. And look to go from there. But yes, that's pretty much it. I say I've almost caught up with Shadespire, and then of course we get this Gamma video with new Blood Bowl team that I really want, a Necromunda gang I want, 2 Shadespire gangs I really want, and like some hints of a possibly Cthulhu-esque Age of Sigmar force. And it's like, oh, blimey, Games Workshop. What you doing to me?
I do find at the moment they are literally, because they're doing such a good quality stuff, like with literally every release, there's so much that you couldn't get dragged into, and it's very hard to sort of say, well, no. I'm fortunate in the way that I focus on Heresy, but whenever I see anything Necromunda at the moment, I'm like, oh, that looks brilliant. I really want to buy that. And it is. I mean, I feel sorry for people that say, oh, well, I play AOS and I play 40k and I play Heresy I play Shadespire and I play Necromunda. I just think they must be literally living on cans of baked beans.
It's hard.
It is hard. Going out anywhere.
So the adage that I've been using of waiting to purchase stuff unless you desperately know you want it. Right, that's the key. If you can wait a week, the chances are you won't, and you don't buy it in that week. Are you ever going to buy it? So looking at the Shadespire stuff, I know I'm going to buy that, but that's what £17.50 a gang and that a warband, and that's from, I think that's GW prices. So that's well within the remit. Yeah, if you went out and bought Shadespire and all the stuff now, that would add up. But when they release 2 warbands every few months or whatever, that's fine. You can handle that. It's very manageable. So yeah, but it's easy for that to pile up. And it's not even the money. It's getting around to painting it all.
Yeah, definitely. To be honest, the purchasing bit is probably the easiest bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's fully dependent on who you are, and some people will paint it all in no time at all and struggle to pay for it, and some people will be able to pay for it and not be able to do it, very few lucky people will be able to do both and be quite happy with it. Sods. But yeah, that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You just one of life's lessons, you have to learn how to say, I'm fine without that. And no matter how much it hurts to do so, you have to just say, you know what? I don't need to start a new army for that. Yeah, whatever game that is, I'm quite happy doing whatever I'm doing at the moment. But it's all good. Right, we'll leave that there, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about special characters. There's been some talk recently about named characters in the Heresy, and events particularly has been a focus for them. So we thought we'd have a little look at named characters, the positives and negatives, what we think of them, and maybe how we use them in games as well. I mean, where do you want to start? You've used Ferris, haven't you?
Yeah, I think this came from, because obviously I've been listening to a lot of other podcasts and bits and pieces.
Traitor.
And when I first when I first started Heresy, all I wanted really to do was to paint Ferrus Manus and have a sort of an Isfan army where he's got loads and loads of Terminators. You know, I just wanted that army out of the book, sort of thing. So that's what I built my list around. So my list was Ferrus with Terminators, with then, you know, I put Land Raiders in for Terminators, and I built a few things around it. So that was my army. I played that army for quite a few years. I enjoyed that army. But since that, I've thought, you know, doing my Night Lords, and I've got no named characters in that, and I wanted it to be a very different sort of army, and I didn't want named characters. But then was listening to other people and hearing people say that, you know, some events don't allow named characters, and some people don't like playing with named characters. I just thought it was a very interesting topic, because I do think there is definitely sort of two sides to this, and I was interested to see what your views were, knowing that obviously in the London Heresy and the other events you've run, you've allowed the named characters and Primarchs and bits and pieces.
Sure. So, was your desire to run them because of the novels or that background for Ferrus?
The novels and the background, because I had a 40k Iron Hands army. Right. So, you know, I read up on Ferrus Manus, and I read the Heresy books, and so when there was a model available, I wanted to own him and I wanted to play with him. I just thought it was super cool.
And was that kind of like right from the start, you were like, I want my Primarch and I want to play him?
Yes,
okay,
completely.
Cool.
Yeah,
so 100%. When you saw him come out, did that make you want to play it even more?
Yeah, pretty much. I remember that I was waiting, because wasn't he released? I'm trying to remember if he was released at a Warhammer Fest or I think it was a Warhammer Fest. He wasn't released at a Heresy weekend, was he?
I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
And I remember him coming out and being super excited. And then I think whenever it was like sort of pre-released, I remember I bought one then and there, and that was the one I then painted for my army and entered into Golden Demon. So, you know, as soon as I saw him, I wanted to get my hands on him. I wanted to paint him, and I wanted him in the army. And he was the centerpiece, the focal point of the army.
Sure.
And I remember, I think, speaking to you before, saying that my army was designed around him. And if someone said, oh, well, we're not running named characters, I would say, well, I can't really play with my army then, because the whole army was built around that as a center point, and nothing else really worked without him in it. It sort of all, like, you know, the rules and the bits and pieces just all fell apart, and I didn't have the right points and the right this and the right that. So it was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. I think there is a difference between what you play with your friends around your house or at a club or a game centre or whatever, and going to events. I think there is a slightly different feel to those. You know, events tend to be, we're talking narrative events, a competitive event, you know, anything goes, you know, 40k, you often see, you know, Guilliman versus Guilliman, that's fine. Competitive event, you're not there for the narrative. If you're at a narrative event, one of the issues there potentially is seeing multiples, and it can become a thing. If you're playing at your club, you tend to know who or roughly what you'll be playing against, I think. So, again, slightly less of an issue. But, I mean, I quickly just noted down a few reasons why people might want to play special characters or named characters, however you want to term it. First off, is the reasons you put. We read the novels, we read the background, we immerse ourselves into the Heresy, most of us, to be fair. We've got computer games now that we can play, all that jazz. And these characters are super cool. And particularly with a game that is so narratively driven, it's going to be only expected that people want to play the characters they read about in the books that are super cool.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
There's whole game systems built on that. You only have to look at, you know, Night Model's Batman, right? You're literally picking, you know, it's made up of the named characters from the comic books, because these are people we read about, we identify with, you know, to a greater or lesser extent, and we have I say all that background's all pre-built. You can quickly decide which special characters you like and which special characters you don't like. In the same instance that people are like, yes, I want to play Angron, they might turn around and say, I never ever want to use Erebus. Because they don't like them that way. So, it does work both ways, but certainly, as driving force, it's bad enough when you're reading a Black Library novel and, I don't know, it's a Raven Guard story, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, yeah, Raven Guard are really cool. I want to play Raven Guard. Yeah, it can happen with legions as well, or just armies in general. So that is a really strong motivator for people who want to play. And the reason I asked about the model is sometimes it's the model. I've stated it a number of times. I play Mechanicum because the Thanatar came out. And I'm not the only one who plays Mechanicum because of the Thanatar. You hear it around every now and then. But people will play legions based on a unit or a character because they want to collect them.
Yeah.
And an army grows out of it. And particularly with Primarchs, we're talking about some of the best models that Games Workshop have ever produced.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And, I at the weekender when I rushed out and I said I wasn't going to buy Dawn and I ended up buying Dawn just because I thought the model was so immense. I just thought it was one of the best Primarchs I've seen. And I just really wanted to own it and I really wanted to paint it. So if you've got a slight curiosity thinking, I fancy doing an Imperial Fist army and you've bought Dawn, you know where you're starting, sort of thing. Well, I want Dawn. I'm going to include him in my list, even though he may not be the rules wise, one of the best Primarchs. But sometimes the model can have that effect where, sod the consequences. I want to play with that model. It looks great.
Yeah, and in theory, in a community where the game is more narratively driven, then that's going to be more common. It's not going to be 100% because, people still do want to win in this game as much as any others. There are elements of that, but there are also, I'm not going to say more, but it's more commonly seen at events. I think it's more commonly out there because I don't like to bag on 40k because I don't think it's fair, because I don't think it's true. There are hundreds and thousands of 40k players who play in their garage who you never see what they're up to with their hobby, and they're every bit as narrative as anyone else. But because the Heresy's driven that way, the overall percentage is probably higher of gamers compared to 40k. So you will get Sigismund because of whatever. You'll get, I don't know, you can name any of them. Erebus, people love Erebus for some reason. You can get all the characters that are in the books that you want to play. People make their own, even sometimes without, we talk about the models looking good. Some of the characters don't have models, and yet they make theirs up to do that as well. So it's not just that, it's potentially it's the ability to create your own version of those characters as well. There's so many options.
That's one thing I love about Heresy is the fact that there are so many cool characters in the books, and even if they haven't created rules for a said character, I think there's great customization you can do with, say, the Centurion models and the Praetor rules. And you can basically say, right, okay, well, this is going to be so-and-so, and I will equip him with this and this and this, and give him digital lasers, and give him this, and give him that. And you can sort of semi-make a pretty good character from the basic building blocks, as it were. So, you can play with them, even if you haven't got the rules.
Yeah, it's definitely something I've seen on not huge amounts of people do it, but some do it, and they'll ask people who are better at remembering or researching. Oh yeah, this character in this book, what were they armed with? What was their mark of armor? Because they just want to make that group, that squad, that character, because it meant something to them to do that. Yeah, absolutely right. And then within the actual named characters that appear in the rules, some of them are just very powerful. And
yes,
there are times when you're just like, this guy's really good. He makes my army better. And
The Valdor effect.
Yeah. Well, I hesitate to say there are possibly better options than Valdor for that, because of the nature of Valdor's bringing the extra punch to a army that might not necessarily need it all the time.
Yeah.
But if you want to bring, well, I suppose it's not too dissimilar to bring Magnus to Thousand Suns potentially. But if you
I found Ferrus very powerful though for the Iron Hands, I think, because some of the Primarchs give those great buffs, don't they, to the whole of the army. And then if you've got let's say a 3,000 point force and you include them, suddenly you get all these bonuses across a vast amount of models, and it makes a real difference.
I think Guilliman does that, but Guilliman's also powerful within himself. Alfaris is probably one of the best examples of that. Like the amount of rules he can spread around the game, and he's got all the special rules himself as well. Yeah. So, sometimes, some people are, further along the spectrum of wanting to play harder games and win games. So they're going to pick more effective choices. That's fair enough. Sometimes it can be a good way to balance your army that maybe is not as strong. Okay, I'll put Guilliman in it. All of a sudden, I've gone from a, 40% army up to a 70% army. Because not only is he good, as we say, but he actually makes all the units around him better as well. So that is a valid reason to be taking a special character. With linked into that is potentially one of the more important things for some people is it changes the way you're allowed to build your army. So Russ,
that can be a massive thing, can't it? Really?
Yeah. I want to do a whole Terminator Space Wolf assault force, then Russ allows Varagir to become, used as troops. Cool. Well, that's, depending on the way you read the rules, that's the only way you can do it. That's a debate for a different time. But opening up options like that can, again, allow you to play that army you've got in your head, whereas the rules themselves might make it trickier than you wanted it to be. And, within that as well, you've got potentially extra deployment options, things like that. The ability to, like Perturabo, deep striking. All right. I mean, that's one hell of an ability to, what was it, deep strike without scattering? Is it turn one as well?
Yeah, right? yeah. Can come down turn one and just, I know what you mean.
And his unit. Right, that can be used very narratively. It can also be used for utter destruction. So, either way you want to look at it like that, the ability to have that, Iron Warriors aren't known for getting up in your grill super quickly, but that's one way that you can do it. And pinpoint a target and destroy it and all that jazz. So, there are lots of different ways. And the other thing is as well, Primarchs tend to epitomise the Legion, don't they? So
they do, yeah.
If you're a World Eaters player, right, sometimes you just want to see Angron running into squads of 20 men just to see how many he can kill, because that's what you do. Yeah. And you see, Korax jumping from fight to fight, or Night Haunter running away from the big stuff and slaughtering all the little stuff. They all feed into Vulcan just walking towards all the plasma, melter fire in the world and just not getting touched by it. All that jazz is cool because it's a personification of the Legion. So when we're already looking at people love their legions, they love their Primarchs as well. But there are potential negatives from taking named characters as well. Where there are always positives, there are almost always some negatives to go with it. If you're playing a game which has a set place within the Heresy, so you're playing Calth or you're just playing, 7 years in Assault of Terror. And
or you could be going to an event where they've said this is where it's set, it's on this planet, and it's in this part of the timeline, and then suddenly it becomes trickier to then say, Horus was there.
Yeah. When actually he was on the other side of the galaxy, or Ferris was there, ever.
Yeah.
So, in general, when we play the Heresy, there is always a little bit of bending of the real Heresy. We a lot of the time we're playing in a slightly alternative Heresy. Some people don't, or some games aren't. Some are very much set in the real Heresy, or they're playing directly the missions with forces and everything like that. But a lot of the time, particularly at events, we are playing a slightly altered Heresy version, which is fine. But some people don't like that as much. So having Magnus appear, next to or fighting alongside, Mortarion, before the Gates of Terror, is maybe pulls them out of the immersion of the game a little bit. So they are potentially tied into that. Alongside that, we've got the fact that particularly at events, if you have more than one of the character, that can draw you out of the immersion. Yeah,
you can say, there's Gilliman number 3.
Yeah,
and he's now doing this.
Yeah, and one thing at my events I've tried to do is I've tried to make it clear that game 1 across all the tables is not necessarily all happening at the same time. So, it's over the period of a few days. So yes, Mortarion's on that table and that table, but that's fine because actually they were 12 hours apart from each other. But in some events, it's going to be literally you're attacking this point whilst this is going on as well. And having multiple named characters across tables can, again, just pull a little bit out of that. The point value.
I suppose it can be a bit tedious if you're... I can see where people can see a negative there, where they've turned up to an event, they've brought their Mechanicum or their militia list, and then all they see is the same 3 or 4 Primarchs in every game.
Yeah.
And they play Horus in game 1, and then in game 3, and then Gilliman in game 2, and in game 4, and they could be sick of it. I can see where that, if you're on the other side, that could be a bit annoying, but also I can see that if that was me wanting to play with a Primarch, and I've themed the army around it, it's very much sort of, I've done this in the right way.
Yeah.
I've done this to try and tell a story.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tricky one, and we'll get into ways of viewing it, I think, in a bit. The other thing is, another major thing for a lot of people actually, is we play games generally between 2,500 to 3,000 points is a very common, or 2,000 to 3,000 points is a common Heresy game, average Heresy game. And
yeah, definitely.
Sometimes when you're bringing a named character, particularly Primarchs in this case, they're taking up a huge chunk of those points. And as a result, you get... So if we take a look, particularly, say, some of the Salamanders armies that we see, 2 or 3 very armoured vehicles, Land Raiders, Spartan, some Terminators, Vulcan, and then a smattering of other bits and pieces around them. It's not a huge force. And it's not an uncommon view of why is Vulcan here on this planet? Why is he hanging around with 20 dudes? He's a Primarch of a legion. Should he not only be used in circumstances that suit? And obviously with different level named characters, that becomes less of an issue as you move down. But that's fair enough. Why is Gulliman on every, micromanaging all these small battles over this planet,
It does sound like Gilliman.
but of all of them, but again, and different named characters have different levels of kind of how well it works as well.
But I've always seen. I mean, I don't know if you see it the same, but if you're playing, I know if you're playing like a 1,000-point game, you might see it different. But if I'm playing, say, a 3,000-point game against another, say I'm playing 3,000 points of Iron Hands versus Mechanicum, I see the force that I'm playing as just a small part of a much bigger battle raging on a planet or in a sector, and all I've done is in our board is focused on a small section of that fight that's happening. So the Primarch hasn't necessarily gone out with just 3 squads of Terminators. He's gone out with his Legion, but you're looking at a smaller snapshot of what's happening in a wider battle. That's how I always perceive it. But I suppose some people may see it as that's the entirety of the army and that is fighting then and there.
Some of the scenarios do suggest that it's more, this is all the forces you've got. Some of them are much more freeform in that. I suppose it used to be, so when you used to play Epic, you used to have the little firefights between units. So you used to have the game, and then as units got closer, the dice rollings were supposed to represent effectively that was a 40k game. Because if you looked at the amount of units you had, it was supposed to represent small arms fire and close combat in little ways. So yeah, you can look at it like that. But yeah, some games do it better than others. And, I think particularly at 2,000 points, which is, where you start to be able to fit in the Primarchs, it potentially is too small, for a lot of them. I think if you played 2,000 points and there was a Primarch in your list every time, then, and I was playing someone who did that repeatedly, I'd be like, come on, dude, let's just mix it up a little bit. But at 3,000 points, it does allow a bit more for the...
Yeah, and I think above 3,000 points, it becomes then a named characters become just really insignificant. Like if you're playing a 5 or 10,000 point game, a Primarch doesn't really do a great deal. It wouldn't be as scary as it would be in, like you say, like a 2,000 point game where they can be really dominant and cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, certainly the ones who don't affect your army as much. So the one, your Russes, your Angrons, all of a sudden they've got to do a lot of heavy lifting to justify what they're doing because they're not force multipliers as much as the others. So yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is as well, tying into that is at small points, they can really unbalance a game, or they can make a game not necessarily unbalanced, but more rock, paper, scissors in style.
Yes, yeah.
Because, if you've got Russ running at you and at 2,000 points, you just might not have enough toys to keep him at bay. A Russ unit, wolves, feel no pain on the unit. 2,000 points, putting enough guns to be able to deal with that. Yes, it's a lot of points, but it just becomes, can you deal with it or not? Because if you can't, Russ will ruin you. As you get more points, you have more of an army spread out to be able to neutralise one target. Not saying it's going to be easy, not saying it's actually the best move to do, but there are more options to you to do that. And that's a fair statement as well. And we have revolved a lot around Primarchs as well. These do work to an extent with some of the cheaper characters, but the Primarchs point levels particularly can be that issue. When you're looking at smaller games, characters like Sigismund can be really freaking good. And there are lots of those little characters around. Who's your guy in the tank? Castroman Orth?
Yes, he can be really handy.
Yes, he can. And at different levels, obviously, Primarchs are easier to pick out because of the huge points. So, that's why we look at them a bit. But there are certainly characters of great value around all the books. Some are definitely better than others. Space Wolf guy who allows a unit to come in with him, he's pretty cool. You pick the right units to do that kind of stuff. Armorless Dynat is one we see a lot. We see him a lot because A, he's cool, B, he has the potential to do, in conjunction with other stuff, do some real damage. So definitely.
Yeah, completely. And
then one of the other kind of negatives is where we talked about earlier, some of the models some of the unit choices, the characters themselves don't have models, and it can be really daunting to make your own and to put yourself out there. And I think you can take some of the character models and say it's quite daunting to paint some of them. Again, this is particularly a Primarch thing, but there are players out there who aren't that keen on like, you hear it, it's like, oh, I'm going to have to paint some more stuff before I even start my Primarch.
And do you know, you hear it sometimes. I've heard sometimes the opposite, where people have actually given it a go and said, oh, well, actually, there's so much detail on a Primarch, it's a bit more paint by numbers than you would have with units. But yeah, I think there is definitely a fear factor with that big centerpiece model, that, you know, you've got to do it justice. You've just spent 70 quid on this model and you've got to make it look cool.
Yeah, and you know everyone will be looking at it and everything.
One model that they'll pick up.
Yeah. So I completely understand that as well. And it's tricky. The current kind of discussion about named characters is an interesting one. And it has revolved mainly around events. At your club, as I say, you know, the good thing about the club is you should be building up relationships with the people you play with. If you're lucky enough to play at a club where you have regular games, a regular group, not talking about pickup games here, but the ability to say to the guy who brings Horus every single game, dude, do you just want to shake it up every now and then? You know, I played Horus enough. Again, some people can only play a certain list. That's the list they build for that legion. I've built that legion, move on. But then they might have another army to play.
That's very much what I found with my Iron Hands. I was just pretty much bored of playing them in that way, and I sort of retired them. I didn't want to play them anymore. So very much sort of that's when I decided I really wanted to move on to the next army, really. And it's weird because the next army had no name characters, and which I then thought, well, is that me saying that I don't like name characters anymore, or is that me just building an army without them? But I would say I do like some of the Night Lords special characters, but they don't feel as though they fit into how I want my army to feel and play. So that's the only reason I haven't included them.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I don't. And I think it's a good thing to have an army without any special characters, because then you do have a bit of an option if you want to play a game with someone. You're not going to, if you are going to play it, you're not going to get too many people complain about the army or whatever else. So
I think
it does have its advantages.
Yeah, and there are different type of collectors out there. Some people will want to collect every single model choice for a legion, unit choice, and some people will want to build an army, move on, build the next legion, build that army, move on, build the next legion. I think it's good to have a mix, to be able to mix them up for you and for your opponent. As I say, the real interesting chat has come from events. And people saying, you go to some events and 70% of the armies have got named characters in them, and Primarchs are repeated across multiple tables. And it doesn't fit the narrative, or as you say, it becomes repetitive, becomes a bit dull potentially for looking at that. And there are different ways of approaching events now, and some have gone with the no-name characters approach. That's cool. Some have done and will continue to do that every named character must be reserved and there can only be one per event. All these things have their strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. No-named characters, brilliant. You're not going to see the same named characters. Right? You're just not, because there are going to be none there. So that repetition disappears. And the fact that you may think that this character won't be on this whatever mission you're doing, that's irrelevant. However, if you take out a Primarch from, say, 10 of those players attending a 30-man event would normally bring a Primarch, how many of those players just replace that Primarch with a Praetor with digital lasers, Paragon Blade, Terminator armor, and then all of a sudden, is that any better than them bringing their Primarch? Some will say still yes, some will say it's more boring. You know,
there's
no
do you
right
remember
answer.
when it used to be the standard? I've got a Praetor. He's got Paragon Blade, digital lasers, Iron Hand.
Yep.
It was just literally carbon copies of Praetors running around the board.
In a Spartan with
and it was
8, 10 cataphracti. Yeah,
that can be equally as boring as a Primarch being run endlessly. So it's how you do it and how you work with it, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is when it was talked about. It's like, yeah, cool. Just my only it's not even a concern. Just be aware that if there are lots of different, as we said, there are lots of different reasons to bring named characters. If one of those is because actually he's really good on the table, then that kind of person who's already thought that way will go, well, what's the next best option? Okay, well, okay, for this Legion, it's a Praetor in a Spartan. I'll spend those 400 odd points on getting a Praetor and extra dudes and an Apothecary and, and all of a sudden you've gone back, as you say, to this template. Some other players will actually say, no, well, I'll do something different. But it's so common to see that Praetor, and it's understandable. I've done it, a version of it when we've been playing, because it stands out, doesn't it?
Definitely.
It's not hard to do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily bad. Some of those characters were in those armies anyway, as well, alongside the general, the named character. So that's not just it either. Some of the other events, the ones that allow only one named character for the whole event. You know what? That's fantastic for narrative. That means you are maintaining the essence of what you're trying to achieve. What it does do potentially is encourage people to buy tickets early. When the first event I remember doing that was Dan Quirk's up in Element, and that was a number of years ago when events didn't sell out, and certainly didn't sell as quick. As an event organizer, having a system that encourages people to buy tickets early is a big relief. So that can be a really good thing.
Double-edged sword, though, if you really wanted to run your Primarch and then you go to buy a ticket and then you see someone's already bought a ticket and is running that Primarch and you decide not to go because of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Could be an issue.
That's a problem for both those methods. You potentially wouldn't be able to attend those with your Iron Hands if your character's taken, or the other one where there's no named characters at all. And you've collected an army and it is literally to the limit with the Primarch. You just can't attend. So that's restrictive. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a thing. It's a thing that you have to be aware of. And sometimes it's just a case of, well, no, I really only like playing this army with my named character. Right, that's the way I designed it. That's the way I built it. Yes, I've got other stuff, but it's always around the named character. That becomes something as well. And that's why at my events, I allow people to bring whatever they want within reason. So it's really hard. We're in a narrative environment. We ask people to self-regulate to a point. We want everybody to have fun. My view of it and I am running, so essentially the only two events I'm running this year are Blood and Glory and London Heresy. London Heresy, as I say, 80 plus tickets sold, possibly up to 100, who knows. Blood and Glory, why can't it be the same? This is obviously an event that's open to as many people as possible. So I have to keep it open to as many people as possible. That means least restrictions possible. So I have to just say, cool, you bring what you want to bring. Now, I've gone to some extent to maybe mitigate that within the rules pack, within, pairing people up who maybe have similar level armies, things like that. But I don't feel like I should be dictating what people can or can't bring or stopping them from coming. There are enough things that stop you from coming. You've got to have a 3,000 point list. It's got to be painted. That kind of stuff is already in there. But I feel bad saying, no, you can't come and bring Ferris.
And
that's fine. And we try and get around that. And another way to mitigate that, again, is not to have all those games happening at the same time. Yes, these games the first set of games happen over a 24-hour period of time. So yes, Ferris can be here and there and there. Because frankly, he's a Primarch. He can do that. Some people might think that's a bit gimmicky. Whatever. It works, not everything is for everybody. It's, whatever, find the ones you like. And I think that's important for all these events as well, because my one concern when it started was a lot of people were like, yeah, I hate that. Yeah, I hate that. And Sons of Heresy were the first podcast I listened to that really did it. In fact, we should actually talk about the Eye of Horus guys, I think, or certainly one of the Australian guys. They gave out named characters. So there were named characters at their event, but they controlled when they were bought out and given to armies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so a more controlled approach then to how they allowed them to interact with the game.
Yeah. So that's a combination of like the first two styles we looked at with no name characters and then claiming your own. It's somewhere in the middle of that. Again, you've got some of those same issues. You've also got the issue of giving your painted models out to people to play with.
Yes, that is a big problem.
Or asking people to bring them along with them because they potentially might be used. Which could then... So if I'm going to an event where I don't know if I can use my name character, who I really like using with my Blood Angels, say, or using my Mechanicum where I've got no name characters... Well, if I don't know I'm going to get to use that guy, do I bother bringing my Blood Angels or do I just bring my Mechanicum? If you might not have room to bring both. So, again, that's an interesting way. I quite like it. You need the right group to make that work. Otherwise, you could end up with, it's horrible when someone breaks one of your models. It's really horrible because you can't do anything about it. Yeah. Except get a little bit annoyed at that person for doing it. And they didn't mean to. But some people are careless. Some people are clumsy. Some people, and accidents just happen. But if I break my own model, that's fine. I can get angry at myself. That's, that'll fade. But if you break my model that I've spent ages painting, I might struggle to get over that as quickly.
You do hold a grudge as well, don't you?
I can do. But it's not even...
the other side of that is, do you remember what was the event? I can never remember the names of events. The one you ran in Cardiff, the...
Taken Reaver.
Taken Reaver.
Yep.
Where Miles painted up those characters.
Yes.
And they were then dished out during the event. I thought that was a really cool thing to do. Obviously, they weren't the name characters that you get out of book, but it was a really cool thing to have that little inject of interest and something a little bit different happening within a set of games. Those characters just popping up. So they where you've got something a little bit special, it can add a lot of interest. If everyone's running Primarchs, then maybe that gets a little bit, can wear you down. But a weird character popping up in the middle of a game that no one knew was going to be there can add a real sort of flavour.
Yep, that also has its downsides though, in that people didn't know how to play them. So this happened at Southampton for the 30k Frontier event. I was given a character and I just hadn't used some of the rules that this character has for a very long time. And it was only halfway through the game. Someone said, why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, oh yeah, they work completely differently to how I was thinking they worked because it's not my normal rule set. So I'm like, this guy's rubbish. Why would I use him? Oh yeah, he was really good. So yeah, it's fine. It wasn't a problem, but you might struggle to remember. That might slow a game down potentially, particularly because I was giving out essentially knight errants. So that can be a bit complicated as well. And the other thing I do, because I allow anything, I'm cool. Bring your Primarchs, whatever. I also have the potential to run what we did at Taken Reaver with the injuries to characters, to named characters. Yeah. So, yes, you can bring Horus if you want, but you've got to calculate whether you want to or not. Now, if that's the only way you run your army, you're going to bring Horus. But if you've got lots of options, you might think, actually, if there are 10 Horuses at this event, he might end up being pretty useless by the time we get to game 4. So actually,
you have 2 or 3 of them die, and then suddenly he's really weak, has no abilities, and is worse than a Praetor.
Yeah, and you've got to balance that right as well. I think we just about got away with it at Attack and Reaver. But that means that I'm trying to... There's an encouragement not to bring them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But, as I say, I just don't want to say no. Because who am I to tell you how to enjoy your game? Now, that doesn't mean these other people are wrong, because when you go to an event, you agree to sign up for how that event runs. So,
yes.
But there's a personal thing in me where I'm like, well, why should I tell you how to play your game? You know? And that's just the way I think. That doesn't mean to say I might not run one of these other things another time. But in general, that's how I feel. And with larger numbers, I think that becomes more important. With smaller numbers,
yeah, and
more manageable.
I suppose at bigger events, it becomes trickier to do the things. If you wanted to do the special characters thing where you knock the abilities down, and you wanted to do that at London Heresy, and you've got, say, possibly 100 players, that's quite tough, isn't it, really? Because then that's a lot of admin, that's a lot of talking to people, trying to get information back. So you've got to consider the environment that it's done in, and then, straight up tournaments, it's not really a problem. But when you're trying to run that more narrative sort of event, it's a little bit trickier.
I have actually thought of ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it. There are definitely ways of doing it. But yeah, standing up in front of everyone and telling you every single character that's died is not feasible.
It was funny though.
It was funny, and I will miss doing that, because you could hear the groans when, like, who was it? Night Haunter kept dying.
Yes,
bless him. He's like, oh, not again.
What about Zardu Layak at the last?
Zardu Layak was brilliant because it became a story hook. We got to use, and because everyone. Even the people who don't really know Zardu Layak know who he is because of the model. So they are well aware there's this word-bearer dude, psychic, blah, 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 blah. And he was up to mischief. So you can pick out things like that. They can actually enhance the story because you have these hooks that people know. If I turn around to those 100 people at an event and say, right, Sigismund's trying to hunt down, Abaddon. Right? That's cool. Everyone knows who Sigismund and Abaddon is. They can picture that story themselves. If I get up in front of 30 people at an event and say, Chapter Master Volgar of the Death Guard is trying to hunt down, Proto, Stern of the Imperial Fists or whatever, then people are, who's he? I don't know, You can do it, but it relies on people knowing more. Well, it's really easy just to say, at the last event, Russ is hunting Primarchs. Russ has heard rumours about Korax. Cool. I don't have to explain any of that because everyone knows them. So there are lots of different things, but the most important thing is, so when this chat came up, so Sons of Heresy were talking about an event they went to where it was full on Primarchs. That's cool. And that wasn't their thing, and that's great. And you never know, I might have been there and agreed with them. I don't know, wasn't there, can't make a judgment on that. But a number of event organisers said, yeah, we should ban, we should do this, we should do that. And my just first thought was, don't everybody do it. I will, because that'll happen, and then it'll be like, no, there's no Primarchs, and then all of a sudden, there'll no name characters. All of a sudden, there'll be a big swift, swing the other way. What I hope to see in an expanded event calendar is a third of the events allow none, a third of the events restrict maybe, and it doesn't even have to be thirds, but some events allow none, some events restrict, some events allow everything. Because I know that when I go to an event,
it gives you that variety then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and people can choose as well. I know that when I go to events, I'm going to want to use Russ at some point. Now, if I'm the only person running events where he allows special characters, then that's not going to happen. I mean, that's, it's hyperbole. That's probably not going to happen, that situation. But for a while, it looked like every single other person was like, yeah, we're going to get rid of them. We need variety. You don't want the whole system to be exactly the same. And this is why I'm so glad that we're seeing the Spartanax pack that came up, the 30k Frontier guys running their events, even just different, everything about an event being different from the normal one you go to is exciting. And special characters can play into that as well. And with linked systems as well, there's potential because a number of these people so we do the linked systems for both events. Company of Legends is one set story. 30k Frontier are doing their set story. The Cheltenham guys, the Geno 5-2 guys have been doing that story for a while. There's potential to carry those named character issues on, whether that's negatives, whether that's story points, whether that's enmities. You can carry them from event to event as well. And they can be named or not named. But again, you have this named brings with it recognition. That's all it is. But
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, we'd probably run that dry. Probably run that dry a few minutes ago, but it's all good. Let us know what you think, I suppose. Have we missed anything? I don't know. Maybe we have. When we do these kind of topics, by definition, they're what we think because we don't open it up a huge amount to other people. So, yeah, it's great. Anyone who listens to this show must like our opinions or like hearing our opinions, whether they agree with them or not, to a point.
I'm sure there's plenty of people shouting at their phone or their
absolutely.
laptop.
Why aren't they talking about this? Well, let us know because, we have our perspectives, we have our blinkers. So let us know what we may have missed out on or what you think we're completely wrong about. Awesome. We'll leave that there. We'll come back and we'll talk with Michael. Joining me now, Michael's back. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Excellent stuff. So we're going to carry on looking at the Primarch books. The next two up are Lorgar, Bearer of the Word by Gav Thorpe and Fulgrim, the Palatine Phoenix by Josh Reynolds. We'll start with Lorgar.
Yeah.
What did you think about Gav as a choice?
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because Gav is not someone that you automatically associate with the word bearer. With the word bearers. Yeah. So from that perspective, I thought, oh, this is cool. He's doing something a little bit different. What I did instantly think is that with a few of the books he'd written, sort of the year or two before this, so the Asserman book, the Eldar one, and a couple of the Beast Rises, I was thinking, I feel like Gav's one of my preferred authors for the shorter format novel.
Right, yeah.
Because I think he just has a way of getting a plot that works in that sort of time frame. So right from the off, I was thinking, I'm feeling positive about this.
Yeah, cool. I think it made more sense once you started to read the book and realise what the story was about. Like, Gav's very good at this kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is cool.
It's a little bit different to the other Primarchs books we've had so far, and even the ones, or at least the one I read since then. Should we talk a little bit about the concept of the book?
Yeah.
So it's a bit like Perturabo before it. It is an origin story. So obviously some of the Primarchs books are tackling those origins. Some of them have been looked at before. This one is set, barring a couple of scenes, essentially cutscenes, elsewhere on Monarchia. It's set on Colchis, and it's set during the time that Lorgar is basically growing up. And it's essentially it's about the sort of abusive father-son relationship he had with Corferon. And it's not about Space Marines and legions and all that sort of thing. It's a personal human story about really about his relationship with Corferon. And there's another character who's another slave. And basically about how the pair of them try to use Lorgar to further their own ends. And anyone who's read most of the Heresy series and seen Lorgar's sort of arc in that, going from this slightly needy sort of character to someone who gradually understands who he is and what he is, I think this book sets out to explain a little bit about how he ended up, how it came to be that he was that sort of needy, not really sure of his direction character who needed that worship sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's done well in the Nairo, the slave, initially he's not necessarily that character, but as things progress, you know, it's another person who then sees in Lorgar what he can achieve for him. And then the other thing this book really does is it highlights, and everyone wants to hate on Erebus in the Heresy, and that's understandable. He's, you know, front and center, but even before this book, it was like, actually, Corferon's possibly, you know, you've got much more reason, and this book fleshes him out to the point where it's like, yeah, you know, Erebus did bad things, but what would Erebus be without Corferon, you know?
That's right. I think Erebus we all know that Erebus had a strong influence on the events of the Heresy, but Corferon had a stronger influence on Lorgar. And that influence facilitated everything else. It's about who Corferon is, how he influenced Lorgar, and really vice versa, but certainly how that relationship played out.
Yeah. And how much has Corferon changed from Imperial finding Colchis and where he is now, which is an interesting thing as well.
Absolutely. And you know, we didn't really know that much about Lorgar's sort of early years, but we also didn't really know much about Corferon. If you think about his depiction in the Heresy, like a lot of these characters, you know, he appears fully formed. We don't know what his origin was. Didn't. And I actually think he comes across as a really well put together character in this, rather than just being, he's like the evil demagogue. He is, but there's justification for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And this is the first real view of Colchis we get as well. So the book's interestingly structured, and there's a whole section at the front on how the day-night cycle of Colchis occurs. If anyone visits, Gav does his blog, doesn't he? And he's explained a couple of times how, I think it was Aaron made a throwaway line about how a day lasts, 7 days on Colchis, and that provides an interesting kind of backdrop to what's going on as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think Gav structured it really interestingly because it's sort of chapter and verse, isn't it? So it plays upon the whole religious aspect. Corferon is a travelling preacher. He's an itinerant preacher. We all know Lorgar's need for faith and his relationship with faith. And so writing it in that chapter and verse structure where it really nicely ties it in from a pace perspective, so it keeps the story going, but it also just works sort of narratively in the context of what that story is all about.
And echoes the Book of Lorgar as well, which is good. Yeah, it works really well. It took me a little bit kind of settling into that, but once I did, that was fine. And we get, so we pretty much get Lorgar's, not long dropped on the planet. We start right at the beginning, and him being picked up and shown schooled, as it were, but with this edge on it, and we find out that Corfaron's not necessarily the most popular man on the planet.
No, I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because it's not like, I guess in characters like Perturabo, we know that Perturabo was brought to the ruling power or the great power of Olympia, and some of the other characters, some of the Primarchs, we know that sort of thing happened. Obviously, the opposite of that is someone like Conrad Kurz.
Yeah.
Lorgar's sort of somewhere in the middle, where he lands, or he ends up in Corfaron's lap. But Corfaron becomes a power on Colchis through the manipulation of Lorgar. But he's very much in disgrace when we first meet him.
Yeah, absolutely. And as with all these Primarchs, it's very, certain ones get it easier because of where they land, what happens to them. But it's easy for people to turn to a figure that is a Primarch because of how over the top they are as a saviour figure. And that becomes, the easy in for what Corfaron wants to do. It's really good. How did you find the cutscenes? Because there are some people who think I think there's some people who think they undermine part of Lorgar's character.
Well, I don't agree with that. It has been a little while since I read it. I don't remember having any problem with the cutscenes. I suspect the reason why they're in there is that this is just not really a Space Marines book,
Right, yeah.
And maybe there was a sense that people would like some form of connection to the rest of the Heresy, like a direct, tangible connection. And without that, people might have gone, I don't get it. It's like it's not a 40k book.
Sure.
It's obviously not 40k, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the purpose was at least partially for that. But it gives context to what the Legion became and what happened after the events of this. I think actually structurally they work. They tie into the fact that maybe 2/3 of the book is very much about the relationship that Lorgar has with Nairu and Corfaron while they're sort of itinerant and travelling around and drumming up support. And then it flips, and the final third is much more about how they then go out and deal with with wider cultures. And so I think you get the different aspects. You get the early days, you get the journey to power, but then you get a little bit of the context of what happens afterwards as well.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with that. One of the issues sometimes with Lorgar is, well, this happened, but why did he go the way he did? Because it's not expansively dealt with. We got a book on what happens, but it doesn't necessarily deal with, like, there's still a lot of questions for people, and this gives a little bit of a kind of, more of a direction for that. So I think that's a good reason to have it as any, to be honest.
I agree, and I think, excuse me, I think anyone coming into this fresh, there needs to be a warning that this does not spoon feed us to, like, why Lorgar made every decision he made. It's a degree of sort of elucidation around what drove his developing character. Because you've got to remember that Lorgar, Primarchs grow to adulthood very quickly, physically. They don't necessarily grow to adulthood very quickly, psychologically, mentally. And he grew to physical adulthood, being abused, in a terrible relationship with a man that he grew to see as his father. And so actually, I think if you take that and extrapolate it out, it gives a lot of context to what happens later on, but it does not go out of its way to sort of categorically black and white explain everything.
Yeah, absolutely right. Have a little bit of faith in the audience to be able to dot the lines, draw the lines together.
Pun intended, I assume.
Yeah, well, no, never, never with puns. Yeah, I think that's pretty much Lorgar, to be honest. I think there's a lot. It's an interesting one. Gav elicits some interesting reactions. I think it's fair to say within the more fervent parts of the community, but I think a lot of people were surprised with Lorgar.
Yeah, and I agree. He does. I think using the same point, I think people should have a bit more faith in Gav, because I think he really knows what he's doing, and I think he set out to do something quite specific with this, something stylistically very different to what we've seen before or since, really, from Black Library at all. To me, it harks back in that sort of stylistic choice of really not feeling like a Heresy story or feeling like a 40k story. The only real analogue I can think of is something like Demon World, which by Ben Counter, which is a bit of a classic, and really feels like you're reading it going, this is weird. This sort of doesn't feel like a 40k. It feels like 40k plus fantasy and this weird mixture of somewhere in between. To me, Lorgar doesn't do that, but it does feel like taking concepts and tone and that sort of stuff, but mixing it with Mad Max and Dune and all these cool influences to produce something that will be surprising to a lot of people, but I think is really characterful and really well done.
Yeah, Cold just comes across as one of those funky sci-fi worlds really well.
Yeah, I guess you can't help but relate to things like Mad Max when it's like a desert sci-fi world.
Dune,
exactly.
Mad Max, even Kroll, aspects of all those, yeah.
But those are cool influences.
Exactly,
to have, in my opinion.
Exactly. It's, when something works, it works. There's a reason. There's a reason it works, and if you want to build off the back of that, then that's you're going to guarantee a level of success in that respect.
That's right. But I would say, and I hope we've got this across, that there is a really interesting book, and still probably I'm not fully up to speed because I've not read Ferris Manus yet at the time we're speaking, but I think Lorgar is probably still my favourite of the books, and I really think it is because it feels fresh and it feels a little bit different, and sheds light that I didn't expect to see on a character who I didn't expect to get that sort of exploration of.
Yeah, that's cool. Groovy. I think that's probably Lorgar handled. Shall we move on to Fulgrim, the Palatine Phoenix?
Yeah, so this one's interesting, isn't it? Because Josh Reynolds has written this, and he's until relatively recently, I don't really feel like he's been that well known as a 40k author. He did a lot of old school fantasy. He's done a lot of Age of Sigmar. He's growing into 40k, and I think the thing that's brought into people's attention has been the Fabius Bile series, 2 books and a bunch of short stories and audios, that sort of thing. That's let him tap into that sort of black humour, sort of interesting mashup of load of different influences that he brings in, and so to me, Fulgrim is a perfect choice because it's that sort of character, that sort of story that really fits Josh's style, and I think it's a natural progression, even though it's pre-heresy, it's a natural progression of that sort of thing that he's been developing.
Sure, yeah, Fulgrim's an interesting character. He's slightly more human than a few of them.
Yeah.
There's the arrogance and everything else in that, but he's prepared to engage with his warriors in a way that some others aren't, or quite a few others aren't.
Yeah, he's definitely no Perturabo, is he?
No.
He's a much more relatable character, because some of these Primarchs are just not relatable. We've talked before about Perturabo, definitely not relatable. Someone like Lorgar, you can relate to in terms of how he's treated, but not as much in terms of sort of how he actually reacts and what his thought processes are. Fulgrim, like I said, is just that bit more human. He's a bit more open with his emotions. And you can sort of see a bit more of yourself and other people in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going back to his first solo compliance mission.
Yep.
That's I'm assuming. Well, that's kind of. Well, he was. The thing is, he was taken and put with others, and that's the essence of this story. Is he didn't get his first solo mission until a little while into his own great, part of the Great Crusade. Mm-hmm. So he's already on the I've got a lot to live up to and make a name for myself.
I mean, we sort of know what happened to the Emperor's children in their early career, and the difficulties they faced. So you've got that idea that he's actually been around for a while, and he feels like he's not been given the chance to really prove himself. That his legion, such as it is, has been tapped into to support other people, and not really under his own steam and under his own glory. And even a young, relatively speaking, Fulgrim, it doesn't take much to sort of see that he's not going to react very well to that.
Yeah.
He's already got that towering sense of arrogance. It's not as developed, and it's not turned into what it turns into yet. But he's not happy to be in someone else's shadow. So, like I said, it's his first compliance, and for solo compliance, and he sets out to really prove that his way of working is just as efficient, just as valid as his brother's. What I really like is that it's not just him going, "Oh, I can do everything that you can, but better." He's actually a bit more humanitarian, isn't he? Because he's essentially saying, my brothers are all warmongers, and they'll shoot first, ask questions later. I don't feel like that's the best way of doing it. Now, part of that is that he doesn't feel like it's as efficient and as sort of he feels like he can do better.
Yeah.
But he also feels like mankind should be able to do better and shouldn't have to go in guns first, which is a really nice little touch, I think. It's not just arrogance. It's tied in with a few other things.
He can, it works within the fact that he wants to make a statement as well.
Yeah.
So it all comes together in this package, which is good. The planet of Bizas. And naturally, all these stories. There's a few coincidences that occur, but this planet's has similarities to Chemos.
Yep.
And that obviously gives more opportunities. And as you say, he takes the 7, including Fabius, which was an interesting choice.
I believe Josh was asked to include Fabius in this, rather than it being an overt choice, which I thought was interesting.
I'm not surprised at all.
Well, he's just such a good character.
He is.
You get to see, and if you've read the 40k Fabius stuff, you'll see a little bit of how he's grown to be treated by the rest of, or what's left of his legion, but and really hated but needed. And it's not quite the same, but Josh sort of extrapolated backwards to how he might be seen. And he's one of the very few left of is it called the 200? So the original Emperor's Children who sort of survived the Blight? Is that what it's called?
I think it was, yeah.
And so the others around him, they're all hunting for glory, and they all don't quite see things the way that Fulgrim does. They are out for themselves, really, and they don't like Fabius, but they also don't like the fact that he isn't. That they need him, they recognise it, but they don't like the fact that he really is sneeringly condescending of them, and he essentially treats them like children. Yeah, that's cool.
It is cool. And he is that oddball of the group, and Josh plays that, which is fair. But you do, I did wonder. I was like, why would you take Fabius? Yeah, it was a little bit of a standout. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he was asked to put in, and partly because of how important he is as a character as well. But that's all good. It's just hard to go further in the story without giving too much away. But
I think it's safe to say that
all go to plan, do they?
You mentioned the similarities with Chemos. I think that was intentional from Josh's perspective, because it's basically Fulgrim saying, "Look, I'm going to prove that I can do it my way." But he's sort of doing that because he recognises that he can play to his strengths. So he attempts to take a system which is nominally compliant or wants to be compliant, and he's trying to do it without resorting to pure force. And so it's a lot of negotiation and that sort of thing. And basically, classic Josh Reynolds, it's a lot of sharp, snide dialogue. And Fulgrim sort of disappointed at the poor assassination attempts and that sort of thing that allows him to be to use his strengths, to play to his strengths. He still cuts loose. He still goes into action mode, but he's not reliant upon that. And so, you get that idea from the name of the system. The planet's called Byzas. I suspect there's a reference to it. It's Byzantine sort of politics, which works. And so, yeah, I mean, you can't say too much about the actual plot, but there's quite a lot of Josh Reynolds-isms in as much as there's not that much fighting. There's a lot of sharp dialogue, and there's a dinner party and those sort of things that fits Josh and it fits Fulgrim and the Legion at that point quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I did like, even those early, the kind of all the dignitaries around and whatever, that was played out like a battlefield, in the way that politics can, and it worked really well.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we've, over the last few years, we've seen more of that, haven't we? With Beast Arises and things like, the binary succession in the Heresy, where authors are starting to really get their teeth into political intrigue and that sort of thing. That's something that probably we didn't get that much of in 40k outside of the sort of non-frontline 40k, the Inquisitor sort of stuff that we've had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which makes it a bit interesting to talk about the podcast, because this whole story we can't hugely go more into, but it's thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like we talked before about Fulgrim coming out as quite relatable.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me personally, he's not a character I particularly loved in early depictions. I thought they were interesting, but I couldn't quite get behind him. I feel like I'm more comfortable with the character now through more recent stuff, and I think this helped. And I like the fact that actually he's going to turn out as a bit of a wrong-un.
Yeah, but absolutely.
You sort of, at this point, you're sort of thinking, yeah, come on, man. Like, I like you.
Yeah, because even at the start of Fulgrim, the novel, he's gone down a path.
Yeah.
So, this is very, very far from that. You can see the very first steps of it, maybe. But it's a long way.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that was probably quite a tricky sort of balance to find when Josh was writing it, in as much as you need to foreshadow the things that are going to happen, but you don't want to make it like, oh, well, they were already like that, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And so I think that foreshadowing is there, but it's not too heavy-handed. I think the interesting thing with this is a bit like Lorgar. It's not necessarily going to appeal to everyone. The pair of these are not like normal Heresy books, for very different reasons. But whereas something like, the Lehman Russ book, in fact, probably, certainly the first three, so Guilliman, Russ, and Magnus, relatively speaking, going to be what people expect. Lots of kind of cool psychic stuff for Magnus, a big scrap for Lehman Russ. But certainly these two have taken tangents to a certain extent. And I don't necessarily think that Fulgrim is going to appeal to everybody. I think if you're looking for Fulgrim how you expect to see him, like I said, he's not at that point, and he's far more relatable. He's far more human. Certainly if you're looking for a cool look at the Legion as a whole early on, you just don't get that. There are literally 7 of them. And you don't get to see a big Legion war or anything like that. So it won't appeal to anyone looking for that sort of thing. But I think if you want something character driven and you want to get really interesting depiction, I think much like Lorgar, this will be very pleasing.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we're going to leave that there. It's going to be a little bit of a wait until the next 2 are available in standard format, but when they are, we'll jump on those.
We will.
So that's what is that? So that's Ferrus and Jagatai.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was trying to think what the next one would be.
I haven't started Jagatai yet, but yeah, that's really cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Michael. And
pleasure as always.
We'll have you on again soon.
I shall look forward to it.
Cheers. thank you for listening to another show. This outro will be just myself. However, we do have a clip here of Neil shouting out an event, so I will leave that up to Neil.
Right, so I had a quick message from a guy on Instagram called Zeno Evil, and he is running a Horus Heresy event in Hull on the 21st and 22nd of April. He's after a quick shout out. It's only a 16-player event, and it's got custom missions, and bits and pieces will be announced on the day, and tickets are £20, but you can look up all the details on Facebook.
Okay, so where on Facebook?
Well, he sent me a link, and it's under Facebook and events page. It's got some horribly long...
No worries. We'll put that in the show notes.
Put it in the show. I'll send it to you, Greg, so you can put it in the show notes. But yeah, he's... by all accounts, I think he's got a little event going on up there. So if you're in the Hull area, might be worth having a look. I mean, 20 is not a huge amount of money for an event.
Yeah, some of those small events can be really cool as well. It's quite cozy.
Yeah, and also if you live up that way and maybe you don't know many players, it's great to pop up to an event and maybe meet a few new people.
Yeah,
and might be able to pick up games with later on.
Absolutely. And we can get on with the rest of things. So first thing, we have the lamp competition that was run via Instagram on Neil's account, and the winner for that is Noll_UK. So NOLL_UK. You've won that lamp. So if you can get hold of Neil, we can sort that all out for you. In addition to that, we've had our first Patreon only competition, and this was a signed poster from Black Library Weekender, actually, and it's the poster for Gaunt. These are the long, tall, hanging posters. We got this signed by Dan Abnett, and the winner of that was Gilles Saru. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that as well as I could. Forgive me if it's way off, but that's just me, unfortunately. But yeah, that's all the admin done for that side of things. On that note, though, another big thank you for the patrons. I will always be thank you for anyone who chooses to support the show that way. If you do want to support the show, the links in the show notes, and you can also find us just by going to Patreon and searching for The Imperial Truth or Greg Dan, so that's no worries. If you've got any comments on the show, we talked about the named characters in the time of between recording and releasing. Other places have talked about them as well, which is good to see. If you've got any feedback on that, feel free to send emails to greg@theimperialtruth.com or neil@theimperialtruth.com. You can also get hold of us on Twitter @ChildofFang or @NeilPaints, and on Instagram @ChildofFang and @NeilPaints. And there's also the Facebook group as well. So feel free to check all of those out. If you want to support the show another way, then I'm recording this bit just an early-ish morning on the Saturday, and Forgebane is now out. Element Games, £76 for best part of £200 worth of GW models under their pricing. A fantastic deal. So I'll be going, once I've got this done, I'll probably be going and ordering mine, to be honest, which is all good. So if you want to support the show, you can go through the link in the show notes, or it's been on social media as well, or go through the advert on the webpage. And going through that just gives us a kickback, helping pay for all the hosting fees and all that jazz. And then a final reminder, if you are available the weekend, blimey, which weekend of it is? London GT. You can go and search the details. There is plenty of opportunity for you to come along and view if you've only got a bit of time available. There are still tickets, I believe, available for the Heresy event, and there were some people looking to get rid of their tickets as well. So just maybe be aware on places like the 30k forums for things like that. They are expanding what they're doing at this event. So Alessio's there with his company looking at, I can't remember which game he's got out now, but there's a myriad of games. Supports there. Forge World are going to be bringing down a stand as well. So if you're you can easily get to that area and there's some bits of Forge World you've wanted to pick up but haven't had the order ready yet, then you can go and pick those up as well. So that's a bit dangerous for all the people who are attending. Even more money to spend. But there we go. I think we're done for an episode. So, Neil, have you got anything to say? No, he hasn't. Excellent stuff. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.